billion people, 60% of whom are below the age of 25. 12 of the top 20 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. 30% of the world's minerals are on the continent, 40% of gold reserves, 90% of chromium, platinum, palladium, diamonds, cobalt, and everything else on the periodic table, everything. Endowed with incredible natural resources. I guess the best resource the African continent has is its people, its resilience that we see, and the incredible way of hustling to create brilliance on the continent. So when we talk about an economic revolution, we've also have to come to terms with the resource curse that I guess has plagued the continent in many ways, lack of industrialization, and how to break through those boundaries. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the conversation. Did I get all the numbers right, Mr. President?
Yeah.
Did I?
Yeah.
And 65% of arable land.
Yep.
Yeah? We wake up every single day in the past 3 weeks to a new world. Lots of things are happening and changing geopolitically, and I want to talk about Africa's growth potential in the new geopolitical global context. Tell me, Mr. Adeshina, how are you weighing this up? If I'm sitting and recalibrating my future, I'm sure all you important people are doing the same.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so, but let me say first and foremost, I'm delighted to be here, and I congratulate the government of UAE for organizing this fantastic event. It's my first time of actually participating. I'm amazed about it. First and foremost, you said it all. Africa is the place to be. I mean, for all the reasons that you said, I'm not worried about Africa for any reason. First, if you look at the demography of Africa, you got 75% of the population less than the age of 35. 600 million people between the ages of 15 and 35. So that tells you that Africa is going to be workforce of the world, the labor workshop of the world, where you have skills, talent, entrepreneurship that will unleash a lot of innovation around the world. Secondly, you were just talking about the issue of agriculture. Look, to feed the world, 9.5 billion people, 10 billion people by 2050, that's not going to come from anywhere in Asia. It's not going to come from Latin America or US or Canada or anywhere in the world, or China, by the way. It's going to come with Africa. Now, take a look at the energy transition in the world, what you were just mentioning, whether it is lithium-ion batteries, whether it is electric vehicles, whether it's platinum, whether it's copper, whether it's graphite, whether it's any of this lithium-ion, all is in Africa. So what Africa actually does with these resources will shape the future of the world that we are talking about. So I am not worried at all about Africa. In fact, I am excited about Africa. And what I want to say is to take a look at a continent with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the population that we have of 1.4, almost 1.5 billion people, a market size of $3.4 trillion. So what we have to do is trade among ourselves, build infrastructure, integrate our financial markets, our stock exchanges, and of course have the right policies, macroeconomic and fiscal policies that attract investment. In fact, for the investors that are here, what I want to say is if you're not investing in Africa, actually, I'm going to ask you, where are you investing in? Look, the fact of the matter is Africa is going to be critical for the world. You were talking about the new changes in the world. Yes, of course. President Trump was elected by the American people to develop America, and he's going to do a great job at it. I have no doubt about it. But my role, our job in Africa, is to market Africa's opportunities. And I'm sure that everybody around the world recognizes these dynamics. Africa is too critical not to be looked at, and Africa is not going to beg its way into development. Africa is going to trade and invest its way into development. I have no doubt that Africa will be the lighthouse for the world under any circumstance.
Okay, many thanks for staying tuned to the FrontBurners. This is policy discuss time, and the report says Nigeria has reclaimed position as Africa's largest economy. Now, with a GDP of $450 billion and a per capita income of $2.20, Nigeria has surpassed South Africa, which has a GDP of $360 billion, followed by Egypt, $300, $300 billion, and Algeria $170 billion. Now, other African economies include Morocco, Kenya, Angola, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Tanzania. According to the World Bank Country Director for Nigeria, Dr. Ndiame Diop, he credited a rebound to macroeconomic reforms, including exchange rate adjustments and improved foreign exchange access, which he says these have helped to bolster growth in Nigeria. Joining us on the conversation virtually this morning is Gbolahan Olojede, who is a policy analyst and a finance expert. Good morning. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, good morning. Good nice to be on the program.
Okay, it's great to have you join us. All right, so the news that Nigeria has reclaimed the position as Africa's biggest economy from South Africa is gladdening, but let's look at it in detail. Now, the World Bank country director for Nigeria says this is attributed to macroeconomic changes that have happened in Nigeria. When President Bola Tinubu assumed role as Nigeria's president in 2023, there were some reforms that happened that weren't pleasing to Nigerians. Could we say that these reforms are beginning to yield change? One of them was the floating of the naira. What's your take?
Well, there are certain positive things to some of those policies. One of it was that we have been living in a bubble as far as our foreign exchange system was concerned. So we had a situation in which there was a huge backlog of foreign exchange obligations which were not being met. We had multiple foreign exchange rates across several different sectors and of the economy, and there were huge opportunities for arbitrage. We had an unreal CBN rate, and anybody who was in that window during that period will tell you that, what CBN publishes as the rate and what you eventually get the dollar at are totally different things. So while we may be saying, oh, dollar was 400 naira, people who had obligation on that window as at then knew that for you to get your obligation fulfilled, you had to pay much more than what was being advertised. So there were a lot of problems with the foreign exchange, and we had huge obligations that were not being met. Now that has potential for discouraging international people who want to be able to take money after they have done business. They want to be able to get their money in foreign exchange. Number two, Nigerians who have imported goods, raw materials from other countries, and they need to pay for all those obligations, were unable to pay. So it was a very bad situation. So the foreign exchange policy came in, it was very harsh at the outset, and we saw the extreme volatility that was associated with that policy in its early days. But since last year, I would say the second half of last year, we have seen elements of stability in that exchange rate. Despite the fact that the exchange rate itself is still is very high, I mean, at an average of between 1,005, 1,550, 1,006, it is very high. But something has happened. It is that stability. Stability brings predictability. So people are able to plan, they're able to project. Business people can know, oh, okay, it will be within this range and this range. That is different from a situation 6 months earlier when dollar went from about 900 naira at the beginning of 2024 to almost touching 2,000. That was an extreme level of volatility. So that has abated. We have a fairly stable currency. We have a situation in which the backlog of obligations on the CBN window have been cleared, and there are periodic intervention in the market to ensure stability. So that is a positive for the economy from the perspective of both the people in the economy and people looking at the economy from the outside. So it might be part of the gains of some of those policies. On the issue of fuel subsidy removal, that was also very harsh. What that policy did was to try and remove the subsidy that had been in the system since the 70s. So when you're taking off the table something that had been there for 40 or 50 years, there is bound to be a problem. The problem was further compounded by the fact that we implemented the foreign exchange policy about the same time. So we're talking of fuel, which was largely being imported. In fact, 90-something% of our consumption was imported as at that time. So when you have an imported good that relies on the dollar, and the foreign exchange rate became as volatile as it became, we were bound to have a crisis on our hands. And I mean, the economy felt it. But that is also changing. That space is changing. In October 2024, September, the local refinery, private refinery, went into commercial production. We were also told before the end of the year that certain production started to come from Port Harcourt refinery and also from the Warri refinery in December. So that particular space is changing. The prices are still high, but we see how prices have moderated also, and there has been certain level of competition in that space. But what the biggest gain so far for that policy appears to be the fact that in absolute naira terms, the government has much more money than it used to have. The chances are that if we had continued without doing something about the subsidy, the nation will have gone belly up. The capacity to meet obligation will have become glaring. Creditors will have come after us, and we will have had to go on our knees, the way Ghana had to do a couple of years ago when he couldn't meet his obligations. However, I hope there's a lot more that is expected from the additional revenue that government made. It seems as if there is a disconnect between these gains in revenue by government and how this gain in revenue seems to have been deployed to the benefit of the people. There seems to still be a gap there. So there's a lot more that can be done, but there is no doubt in my mind that there are certain gains that have come from those policies. And if we continue to reinforce on the positive side and work at it, I'm aware, for example, that there's still a lot of importation of PMS that is going on. What do we need to do in that nexus to ensure that we can create value locally rather than continuous reliance on importation of fuel? What will be the impact if we become a net exporter of refined petroleum products as a country? The foreign exchange gains and all the other opportunities that will create are areas where we need to reinforce to ensure that we can get the full benefit of what those policies have to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Gbolahan. And it's refreshing to hear that at least there are some positive steps in the right direction as government makes reform. Yeah, but looking at the figures of 450 billion US dollars as GDP, also given the fact that the informal sector in Nigeria is hardly accounted for, do you think that that is really realistic and Nigeria is not bigger than a $450 billion economy?
Love this question. And I'll tell you why. Recently, I was engaging with some people, and I told of how Nigeria is a country where somebody tells you that he has not been paid for 6 months. But he keeps going to work, he pays his rent, he feeds his family, he sends his children to school, he attends to healthcare, but he has not been paid for 1 month, 6 months. Sometimes they tell you he have not been paid for 1 year. I'm not saying those things are not happening, don't get me wrong. I'm saying that those things are a pointer to the reality that there is an economy that is not being captured. Ask yourself, how did that guy meet its obligation within that period when he did not receive salary? So We are not captured. There is a huge informal sector in Nigeria. And a lot of what is going on in that informal sector is not being captured. We also have a lot of dependencies around. So there are people who part of a chunk of the income that they live on is not even from the work that they do at all. Those are not being captured. So we need to adopt a situation in which Nigeria as a country determines how and what it wants to measure. It will help us a great deal to even out our numbers rather than just rely on maybe what the World Bank is saying and what IMF and the rest of them are saying. We understand our economy more than any other person. And we should tap into the peculiarities of that economy to do a proper measurement of the true size of this economy. As it is today, I think most of what we still measure are in the informal, are in the formal sector of this economy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gbolahan Olojede, and it's good to see you once more. Let me ask this question. Sometimes Nigerians will criticize the government when it comes to issues like gross domestic product. Now we're banding around $450 billion as our GDP. But there is, like you mentioned earlier on, there is no correlation between the increase of government revenue translating to what should be on ground or reflecting in the lives of the people that it's catering for. So in what way can we measure when a country has a very high GDP? How do we supposed to see that translating in the purchasing power of the individual, of the average Nigerian? Or how does it translate? How does it reflect in the business of an entrepreneur to be on the advantageous side? Not so that people don't say, the government is peddling and banding figures around. We are still in this economic downturn, but on paper, the government is doing well, but in reality, it is not doing well. How do we analyze that?
Yeah, that disconnect that you refer to is real. I remember in the book by Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, something about, dealing with corruption is difficult. I've forgotten the exact title now. One of the problems that government then, this was Mr. Jonathan's government was trying to solve was the apparent disconnect between the growth that we were seeing then. I still remember the popular statement by the president when he was talking about, by the then president, when he was talking about the jets, the number of private jets that attended a particular event in one of the East African countries, as a measure of the fact that we were doing great. Meanwhile, his coordinating minister for finance had another problem which she could see. And that problem was that the growth that we were talking about was not exactly showing forth. It wasn't really, going all the way down to reflect in the lives of the people. So, and that circumstance that we were trying to cure, even way back, still persists till today. So GDP could grow, but if it is growing and it is not dovetailing into the lives of the ordinary citizen, then that it shows that disconnect is still there. So the consciousness that is still there is what should help the policy designers to do things that will continually ensure that this growth that is going on out there is also reaching the people. I'll tell you a very good example. In the space of agriculture, knowing fully well that food inflation had become an albatross, is a major problem and a key driver of the inflation that we are experiencing. As government finances is improving across various levels of leadership, the state, the local government, the federal government, everybody was getting more cash. The question is, how much of this more cash are we investing in solving the food problem? if we have identified that food is a major driver of the inflationary pressure that we are experiencing as a country. So how many of the states have made major moves in creating those environments where there are more people coming into that space and providing more food for the people? That is the question. If you take a state like Kaduna, Kaduna is a major food producer in this country. Some years ago, Kaduna was so hot that it affected production. Today, Kaduna has become relatively calm. When last did you hear of all those mass killings that was going on in Kaduna just a couple of years ago? So the question, so if Kaduna State has become relatively more calm and there is more money at the state level, what are the steps that the state is taking to ensure that it can put Kaduna back onto that massive food production level? And it is not just about Kaduna. I was only picking on Kaduna. It's about the entire 36 states in Nigeria. We have a country where we can do farming literally for the 12 months in a year. But we are still importing a lot of what we eat from countries that cannot do farming more than 6 months in a year. It is a shame. And we need to be able to find the right level of connection to ensure that it is not just banding, big GDP, but that big GDP is making to count for the people, for the ordinary citizen of Nigeria.
Yes, Mr. Gbolahan. I just also want to chip this in. You also look at the drift from rural-urban migration in Nigeria has actually affected a lot in terms of food production in Nigeria. If I take my village, for example, if I look at that community today, where we used to be a food hub and shipping food to both the north and the east of the country, today we are importing food because the young people have been told somehow that the only way to earn a good living is having a paper qualification. And so everybody is in the city looking for a job that does not exist. What practical step do you think government can take to reverse this kind of trend?
I believe that government can do a lot. Some state government are already trying to find platform, come together, find a platform that could reintroduce agriculture to the young people as a good source of income. Technology has been infused into agriculture. How much of that are the young people being connected with? We have a young population. Nigeria is a young country, and it is a blessing because in that youthfulness is the energy of the youth, both mental and physical. But how we go about harnessing and harvesting this energy and deploying it is part of what will help us to transform this country in every sphere. And one of the major spheres is in the agriculture. Apart from that, if all the young people are going out there, there is a gap there which I believe government can help with. Along with even the young people who are already in agriculture. There are a number of them, there are not many of them, and they can showcase in partnership with the government to let the young people know that there is a lot of value here and that not everybody needs to head to the cities to go and look for jobs that are not even available or paying them. There is a room for orientation and reorientation of the young people to be able to participate there. Then we also need to be able to do a lot more about commercial farming. Most of the farming we still do in Nigeria are subsistence in nature. They are smallholder farmers that are producing most of what we have. We need, number one, to put a structure in place to help those smallholder farmers, a structure that guarantees offtake, a structure that guarantees value for production. At the same time, the product becomes very cheap and prices drop. 2 months after the product is out of season, price has gone up and the price becomes prohibitive. But while it is in season, a lot of the product gets damaged. We still have up to 40%, 50% in certain categories of products in Nigeria that go bad, that will go bad every harvest season. When we have a situation like this, there are infrastructure issues we need to bridge, storage issues, electricity issues, connectivity issues from the rural areas to the centers of consumption or centers of processing. All these are issues that will help to transform that space. When a farmer is sure that there is an offtake for his product and that the offtake will be such that will leave him with a profit, he is encouraged to go back in the next season to go and farm. But if he produces this season and a lot of what he produces goes to waste, there is no incentive to want to produce in the next season. These are some of the areas where these gaps are, and government should help in creating those, reforming those environments to bring in private sector investment and help to transform that space. If we transform the opportunities I just heard, Niger State alone, in my estimate, can feed West Africa. If you get security, it has huge piece of land. Niger State alone in land mass is about two and a half times the size of the state of Israel.
Okay, let's take a look at what we major on in Nigeria and what we can do to improve the economy. Yes, it's good news that now Nigeria has reclaimed the position as the biggest economy in Africa. But what can be done to improve this? If we look at what Nigeria earns from agriculture, it's put around 504 billion naira, or somewhat over that if we're making it more recent, maybe adding the contributions of 2025. Now, if we also take a look at what Nigeria earns from outsourcing, Nigeria earns $0.99 billion from outsourcing. India earns about $118 billion from outsourcing. At what point should we begin to consider human capital development as a major earner for Nigeria?
Beautiful question. I think the best resource that we actually have is our human capital. I mentioned in one of my previous comments that we have a young country, and that means there's a lot of energy on the table, the energy of the youth, both physical and mental. And if we are sensitive to this, it will cause us to be deliberate about how we are able to harness and deploy this energy that we have. I still remember vividly some years ago when we suddenly found Mark Zuckerberg at Sabo in Lagos. He was going from one cyber cafe to another, gisting with people. He came to Nigeria, one of the wealthiest people in the world. He didn't go to Abuja. He didn't even visit the Lagos state government before he went to Sabo to go and start looking at things. Why? Because right where they are, where he was in America, he could see certain activities that was going on somewhere in a place called Nigeria. And he came all the way to the center of activities to come and see for himself. What is it that is going on here and how can it be enhanced? Not for Nigeria, but for his own economy. His own economy, his own business. That is why he has come to Nigeria. So the question is Nigeria itself looking at these opportunities? Are we moving fast enough? I know we are doing a bit of activities in that space, but are we doing enough? Is there a way we can rev things up in creating more of all these incubation centers, being able to create an environment where there will be more venture capitalists who can put money on some of the innovations that are coming out of Nigeria? Already, internationally, people are coming to this same Yaba Sabo axis to come and recruit IT people. So there is a lot that is going on. I'm even happy now that we are beginning to pay more attention to our digital economy, because there's a lot going on there that are not also being captured. Maybe now that we're paying more attention, we will start to capture it. But indeed, like you said, we must be deliberate about our human resources. Education count, and not education the way we understand it. The way we have taken education in this country still lies largely on the industrial age. Education has moved away from how much you score in English and mathematics. It's a whole lot more. It is not everybody that even needs to be in the university. I hope but these are not things you can discuss with a lot of people. They believe that, oh, but you went to the university, why you don't want my child to go to the university? But education goes way beyond that. We must do a lot more. Let me give you a number before I drop that education thing. The education budget for South Africa is an equivalent of 25 trillion naira. That is about half of the entire return, the entire spend, the entire budget expenditure of the federal government of Nigeria today. We have the largest GDP, but we must ask ourselves the question, how come this largest GDP is only able to put on the table for us 54 trillion naira in the federal government budget? Whereas a South Africa with a smaller GDP, with only 60 million people, is able to put on the table about 4 times or 3 times that amount as its own budget. It is a question to ask ourselves. It shows that there is value that is lying everywhere in this country that we are not yet sweating, that we are not able to put to play. And we must be able to. We are also blessed with not just human resources, but natural resources. Our oil resources, we've not been able to meet our quota for a very long time. I'm glad things are changing in that space. We are growing in production. Our gas is there. We are a gas country. We need to do a lot more in the gas space. We are blessed with lithium in commercial quantities. Lithium is a major factor in the energy transition of the world as electric vehicles and the rest of all things along that line are taking out shape, and we are blessed with it. Where is our 20-year lithium plan or the 10-year lithium plan about how we intend to tap into that resource and use it as a platform for transforming the energy space in this country and industrialization also for that matter? So the gap is there. Power to power our industrialization is still not there. There's just a lot to be done, essentially, to be able
We must thank you very much, Gbolahan Olojede, who is policy analyst and finance expert, for being with us today on the FrontBurners. We do hope that Nigeria can do better, and it will not just be us saying our economy is bigger than any other African country, or we have the biggest economy in Africa, but the citizens can actually feel that change, and we would be hoping for better days. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.